Flag. I need a motion to adopt the agenda. I heard somebody say so. Commissioner Carabelli? Commissioner Drollet? Any additions? Item number 4 is the approval of the minutes. Well, we did them both. We can do them both? All in favor? Please vote on your iPad. I am fast. I'm looking, no, I want to get down to mine. I did. Can we get the approval of the minutes? I need a motion to approve. Commissioner Drollet, Commissioner Brown. Any additions? Please vote on your iPad. Next item on the agenda is item number 5, public participation. Anybody in the audience wishes to speak? You have 5 minutes. Seeing none, I'll close that portion of it. Move on to item 6, which is the presentation. This presentation is from the Sheriff's Office. It's the Unmanned Aerial Unit Drones. Captain Dave Kennedy, Sheriff's Office. Before you get started, I need a motion to receive and file.
So moved.
I heard somebody. Commissioner Myjack, supported by Commissioner Brown. You're up, Sheriff.
Good afternoon. Thank you.
You wish.
Thanks for the
You
promotion,
wish.
too. Don't tell me.
You wish, Cap. Go ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. It's nice to see everybody again. As you know, I'm Captain Kennedy. This is Deputy Michael Dixon. He is my team commander for our UAV unit, which is Unmanned Aerial Vehicle Unit. Probably a year or so ago, it was brought to my attention that by Deputy Dixon that these tools here that you see sitting here in front of you could be very useful to us at the Sheriff's Office in any number of different ways, not the least of which is gathering evidence information, photographic information of car crashes or crime scenes, search and rescue missions, active shooter situations, that type of thing. I asked Deputy Dixon to do some research and then bring me back some information regarding the costs and the best product to buy, and this is what we arrived with. We have 3 of the smaller white ones, and I'll let Deputy Dixon explain exactly what these are, but the smaller ones are going to be utilized by our deputies that are out in the field. We're going to put them in substations, one in Mount Clemens, one in Macomb, and one in Washington Township. So, as you may have seen in our press release, we're training up 14 deputies. They're in the process of, they've had some training, now they have to take an exam through the FAA, which I understand is quite rigorous. Once those deputies are trained up, they will have access to this smaller UAV, which will be kept in the substation. So anytime that, for example, today in Macomb Township, there was a report of an elderly lady with dementia that had walked away. So if something like that, they could go back to the station, grab it, put it up in the air, and it would work out very quickly and very easily for us. The other piece of equipment there is a larger, more complex UAV. That is going to be used primarily by Deputy Dixon, and as we get more people trained up in the use of that, they'll be using that as well. That's going to have will have cameras. The bigger one's going to have FLIR, which is forward-looking infrared cameras, so at night, if we're looking for somebody or something, we can go up and see that type of thing. We did use money out of our forfeiture fund to buy this equipment. And at this point, I think I'll turn it over to Deputy Dixon, unless there's any questions first.
Okay, I just want to explain the major differences between these, other than size and color, obviously. Oh, sorry. I'll explain the major differences between these other than size and color. The smaller ones are, if you're familiar with DJI, they're a well-known company. I did my research. They were the biggest, best, baddest, whatever you want to call them. Parts are available. As happenstance would occur with this, when I was doing my research, I did find a local distributor and service center, which was also a bonus. I went down and put hands-on, talked about what he could do for the department, what type of service abilities he could provide to us, and it was a win-win situation versus doing research online, buying something online, something breaks, shipping it back, getting something new. So this worked out immensely that he was the DJI dealer. The white ones are Phantom 4 Pros. They are equipped with their own cameras. They take great photography and video. As Captain Kennedy said, we'll be deploying these in various locations, and we can get these out very quickly. The larger unit, the Matrice, which is also a DJI, it's a little more resilient to weather conditions, high winds, moisture to a certain degree. It has self-heating batteries, so that it's ready to go pretty much in sub-zero temperatures. We don't have to really wait for anything, and they can be up immediately. And time, the time that these things save in deployment is just, I can't stress enough how valuable these have become. The areas that we can cover essentially can almost eliminate some of the resources that we've had to use in the past as far as large search parties looking for a lost child. Myself and a reserve officer went out and aided Chesterfield with this, the larger unit, and we covered 35 square miles in right around 4 hours. Whereas there were 15 or 20 people trying to assist. I think they got over about 3 miles. So that's worth $1 million right there to me. If my child were lost, I would definitely want this out there helping me. The larger unit is equipped with FLIR. We can interchange them. We can run them dual at the same time. It also requires a VO, visual observer, as well as a pilot in command, a PIC. It works best. It's the safest way to operate that. One can watch, observe crowds, people coming at us, anything like that, while the other operates the machine or the craft. The picture quality in that is equivalent to what you would see on the news or on TV. And the cameras really can outprice the actual unit if you really wanted to go that far. I just attended something with USA Today and their photographers and videographers, and we're right up there with what they're using, and they can't say enough about them either. So I'm excited about this. So forgive me, I got goosebumps. Do we have any questions on any of these units or anything that I can assist you with?
We do. Commissioner Romano?
Thank you, Chair. Deputy, do they have multiple screens that you could use for that large drone or the small one? Or is it just that one screen that you can utilize? Or is there a hookup?
With the large one, we use dual controllers and dual iPads. One can operate the camera and concentrate on that specific task, while the pilot can operate off of his FPV camera, which is the little circular, looks like it's got 2 little eyes on each end on the front of that. He can operate the drone like your first-person view.
So you're saying you can't have multiple screens? You could have 3 or 4 deputies or whatever looking at a screen of crowds with just that one drone out there?
Correct. They also have, we haven't gotten that far yet, but they have interface capabilities, and we're trying to come up with a solution to actually getting a live feed to Comtech, whereas they can monitor it and help us, possibly.
Well, I appreciate you paid out of drug forfeiture. I gotta ask that question.
Absolutely.
How much?
26,000.
26? That's cheap at twice the price. Thank you. That's all I have, Chair.
Chair Smith?
Thank you. I think this is a great idea, and I'm happy you guys have jumped on it. I mean, because you're jumping on new technology while it's still new, which is unusual for governmental agencies, so kudos. I just have some just pure curiosity questions on the distances that each one of them will travel away from the actual operator, and speeds and air times. I mean, only just because you're here.
Everything is going to be strictly followed under FAA guidelines. We will not deviate from that. The FAA imposes hefty fines, so we're definitely going to go everything to the letter with what they require. as a rule of thumb, it's visual line of sight. You have to keep them within sight.
Okay.
As long as you can see it and it's operational. The abilities for these to travel at greater distance, of course, there's, I don't know the maximum off the top of my head, but some of these can go up to 9,000 feet, which we're only allowed by FAA guidelines to go up to 400 feet above ground level. Unless we're operating above a structure, then we can go the height of the structure plus 400.
Got it.
So
What's the flight times on those? Like, how long can they actually stay?
they vary depending on the unit. The larger unit has a flight time, a safe flight time of around 25 minutes, even though they advertise 30, but you need an additional 5 minutes to bring it back to you safely.
Okay,
Some of the smaller units are right between 20 and 25,
okay.
so it's fairly equivalent.
And so when you're doing some type of a search, they're out there for 20 or 25 minutes, they come back, is it a quick recharge type thing? Or
We
how-
have
or you
multiple
just
batteries.
Just switch them out, okay.
Switch them out, put the old ones on charge, and
Nice.
right back up. So we can be out there for quite a while.
In the last thing on the infrared, is that like a heat detection type thing for seeing, in the evening or in the night and maybe through some woods or things like that? And
Detects heat. Yeah,
And-
so from a person or an animal or anything that gives off heat will show up on that camera.
from what distance? I mean, just out of curiosity, like how high? I mean, from 400 feet, it'll still pick up ground?
Find that out.
We haven't, okay.
Yeah, in all honesty, these units have not flown yet, other than to be tested by our deputy.
Right.
I'm working through risk management to make sure we got proper insurance. The ones
Right.
we've used so far have been Deputy Dixon's and our reserve deputies' personal drones. So these will be put into service as soon as I get the okay from them.
That's awesome. All right, thank you.
Everything by the book.
Commissioner Brown?
My questions were answered. Thank you.
Commissioner Kleinfeld?
Thank you. With respect to the night with the heat, the camera, if you can only fly it as far as you can see it, how does that work at night?
At night, we have to get emergency waivers. They have anti-collision lights on them, just like an aircraft. When you see an aircraft up there 10,000 feet, you can still see the beacons.
So how long would it take you to get the emergency waiver? Is that just something within the department?
No, it has to do directly with the FAA, and that's dependent on the situation. I'm sure they would grant us one in severe situations. But again, it's the FAA, and they're very, very strict on what they do and what they offer out.
Okay.
We have not yet had to apply for one, so I can't answer as far as time frame. But
Okay, because that would probably dictate in the future whether or not the infrared is important to you if you if
you
you
can use
can't.
the infrared during daylight hours as well.
Okay.
It will pick up a heat signature in dense wooded areas.
Okay, and I have a cousin who's a police officer, and he's got one that looks very similar to that white one. So I've seen how far they can go up and away. I don't know if he was following the guidelines, but we were up in the mountains.
Oh, where's he live?
Well, it was in Montana up at a lake, and what he did was he took it across the lake into another bay and took it to the window of our cousins, and so we were spying on our cousins at
very-
the other
very
house. They know we were doing that. So anyway, how fast can they go horizontally?
Horizontally, that's a good question, because top speeds are up to 60 miles an hour. Some go up to 70. I don't know if
Okay.
flying vertical will affect horizontal speed, but the horizontal speeds we know.
I was just thinking maybe with a car chase, I'm just curious what their capabilities were. Clearly, if they get too far away, you'd have to pull them back. But if somebody's, I've seen a lot of car chases where they do a lot of circles, so
Yeah,
I was
this
just
would be
curious.
a thing where we would just launch it straight up in the
And
air.
keep an eye on it?
And we could basically follow it that way.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I got two questions. How's the damage control on those? You know, you got nuts out there who want to do something with these, and when they see them in the air, and how do you protect them from those nuts trying to do something with them?
That's a good question. I was just reading some information on people who would do that, and I think since these are sheriff-sponsored unmanned or aerial vehicles. They're equivalent to an aircraft. So you can actually pursue something like an act of terrorism or something against an aircraft. It wasn't specifically defined in this, but it was an interesting read on that it's police property, so them trying to destroy police property would definitely have some impact on them.
At minimum, the charge would be malicious destruction of police property.
Yeah.
At minimum.
Okay, and the other question is, like, when you go up in a helicopter, you can zoom right in on the license plate of a car from wherever. How positive are these to do the same?
Well, this has a benefit over a helicopter, because I know, at least the one, correct me if I'm wrong, the ones that we have offered to us, they don't have that ability. You're talking like FBI grades, huge governmental agencies that have that. We can bring this down to follow the car under a tree line, whereas a helicopter can't. So we can achieve the same thing, it's just gonna be at a different altitude.
Well, I'm seeing that I went up a couple years ago in the Oakland County helicopter when we had it over at the sheriff's office. And there you can zoom right in and read the license number.
I'm gonna put in for that next.
Huh?
No, that's great though. But these, we can get zoomable cameras for these, but again, that all comes with a price, the technology
Okay.
comes with a price.
Give us the price. My vote's yes, okay.
I like the way you roll.
Commissioner Lucido?
Hi, I'm wondering, are they labeled in any way as sheriff's, property of the sheriff?
They will
property-
be, we wanted to make sure all the tape was cleared and everything first to
Okay.
get the green lights, and we'll put some indicators on there.
Just in case they went down. And another question, do we have any type of laws or anything for people that use these? I see them in my neighborhood, and they're kind of invasive if they're,
There are basic rules. The hobbyist, it's just like anything else, they're not strictly governed.
okay,
As far as privacy goes and stuff like that, your basic harassment laws, things like that, trespassing laws, issues like that, recording people,
Right.
posting it online. They're no different than someone using their cell phone essentially, except this cell phone flies.
yeah,
So, the other guidelines are laid down by the FAA as far as when you need to register them, who can, who can't. But technically, if you're gonna get into the big boys like this, they have to be registered. You should have your Part 107 licensing, which is actually a pilot's license.
oh,
So we cut no corners in these. Everything was done the correct way.
okay,
Our policy on this is 17 pages long, which a lot of it's FAA rules, because we have to.
yeah.
So we're gonna follow the rules to the letter.
Well,
Yes.
it's a great idea. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Commissioner Kraft?
Thank you, Madam Chair. In terms of if they're damaged and need repair, is there a warranty on them? Who repairs them? How does that process work?
There is a warranty offered by the person that we bought these from, the company that we bought these from. He's been extremely helpful with everything. He's actually been out to the department just for simple questions and some simple hands-on instructions on these 4 or 5 times already, and he's located in Garden City.
Okay,
So I had to buy him dinner, but,
that's fair.
that's good. But he's been great, so.
Okay. And in terms of the camera, let's say the rest of the drone unit flies, works fine, but the camera goes out. Is that something that can be swapped out on its own? And if we needed a newer camera or something,
Yes.
could we replace that without replacing the whole drone?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen.
If you could see the matrice, the larger unit in front, the camera's actually detached right now.
Okay.
So they connect right on the bottom. It's just a simple twist and
Gotcha.
lock.
That's what I was wondering. Thank you. Thank you both. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I don't have any other speakers on the list. Are there any other questions or comments? Seeing none, there's a motion and support to receive and file. Please vote on your device. Item passes 12-0. Thank you. The next item on the list is the department recommendations, and the first one is from the front of the court, and that would be a motion to approve the 17-18 budget amendment for the front of the court in the amount of $184,975. by decreasing salaries and wages with the corresponding increase to indirect cost expenses in order to fund the total anticipated indirect costs. And we have Tom Bloom's going to speak on that.
Thank you, Commissioners, and good afternoon. Thomas Blom, on behalf of the Friends of the Court. Finance contacted me and requested we do a budget amendment for the reasons stated in the request. We're short about $184,000, $184,975,000 in our indirect costs. We want to transfer these monies from FOC wages. We do have the monies there to indirect costs to meet their needs.
And the money is in the wages due to vacant positions, or?
Primarily, we've had an inordinate amount of FMLAs this year. We have a lot of promotions and positions are vacant, so the monies are there as a result of those vacancies and the FMLAs, some long-term FMLAs.
Do you know how much money is in that pot of unused?
I do not.
Okay.
Family medical leave act, when somebody gets ill, they can use up, some of their time, but a couple of our employees have been sick so long that they've run out of time.
Chair Smith?
Thank you. Good afternoon. Could you speak a little bit to the increase in indirect costs and what the reason behind that is?
I can't, but I can speak partially to it. I was told that it's due to IT costs, but Steve can speak.
So it's Jaco's
more
fault?
succinctly to that. Pardon me?
It's Jaco's fault?
It's Jacob's fault. Only because he's not here. Steve can speak more to that than I can.
Okay.
I wish I could speak more to that, actually. I don't know all the line of details out of the cost plan. So this cost plan is from 2007 or 16, which we did not have in our hands when we put the budget together for this year. So we budget our indirect costs based on a cost plan from 3 years prior, and then when we get the latest one, we charge. So costs across the board would probably be expected to go up because of salaries and fringe benefits and other things of that nature. I don't know the individual cross charges from all the central service departments or what those particular items are, but these numbers would have come right from an actual cost plan from Maximus. I can follow up with you and let you know what that information is. I guess this is, again, a cost neutral.
No, I understand
move,
it's
yeah.
cost neutral because it's in the budget, but I mean, if we didn't have this, then we would have extra money in the budget. So I mean, I know there's money in the budget for unused wages, but so then are we gonna look? Is this gonna be the new norm then? I mean, this extra right now, since is that what we're looking at carrying on from here, or is this a one-time issue that just came up because we did something?
No, I would
new and
expect
innovative?
it to probably go up each year because salary and benefit costs are going up, operational costs are going up, unless there's vacancies or something in what we call the central service departments, which would be finance, purchasing, IT, corp counsel, those kind of departments. So that's where the costs are that are being allocated through the cost plan. Provided that most of those departments are fully staffed, you're probably going to see increases each year.
Just give me a quick rundown of what are indirect costs exactly.
So we allocate out to most of the, I'm going to say all of the grant funds. Costs, they're overhead charges, administrative charges. So we charge out the cost of my office to the grant funds based on the number of accounting transactions in each department. HR is based on the number of employees or the number of union employees, actually, for the labor relations portion of the HR function. Corp counsel, I think, is just based on percentage of total payroll. I mean, there's different allocation statistics. We're trying to cover overhead charges.
Okay, and then, so just back to, we can probably expect that this number is going to carry on when you present a budget, that this will be more of the new norm for these overhead costs going into the future?
I would expect that.
It is, we did plan for an increase in our budget
Okay,
for the years to come.
got it. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. All right, so on the same lines, and I will have another question for Steve. So so you're moving it from wages to indirect costs. When we get the new budget, are you gonna be looking to restore in the wages where the wages were before? Then, as opposed to, so the indirect costs will be the higher amount when we get the budget, and then you'll be looking to restore in the wages what was taken out for next year's budget.
Correct. And then there'll be an offsetting revenue in the general fund for the increase in the indirect costs charged to
Okay.
the front of the court fund.
Okay, so when we get the budget this year, is it going to have 2017 adopted and 2017 amended so that we know what changes we've made in the line items during the year?
Yeah, we're planning on swapping that out with the year-to-date actual, which is kind of,
That one's
meaningless because
unimportant.
yeah.
That's why I was asking, because we've had this discussion of, this one's important and that one's not really as,
right. And
okay.
again, you may see the same thing a year from now because the indirect costs that we put into the 2019 budget are based on the 2016 plan, and we'll have the 17 plan maybe in a month or two. But
Right,
it-
as long as we know what's going
and then
on, I mean, that's
I
fine.
think the Community Action Department was here a month or two ago because they have an increase, and we did a similar thing, so.
Right, so the reason I'm asking is there's gonna be line items like this one where we should expect that it would, next year, that the wages would go back up and the increase
I would
would be
expect
there.
it, yeah.
There are gonna be other line items in the budget where we agreed to do a budget amendment for a one-time purchase, where we might be looking to see in next year's budget if that higher dollar amount is still
Right.
there. Say we allocated 500,000 for the purchase of a vehicle. I might want to see if that 500,000 is in the new budget, and I could tell the difference between the adopted and amended. That's why I was asking about
Right,
that.
exactly.
All right, thank you.
Commissioner Carabelli?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Don't sit down yet, sir. Questions for you. IT's budget was adopted by the board. X amount of dollars were put in different funds. One of the examples you gave of indirect costs that went up was IT. And that, to me, the hamster wheel stopped. What increased on his end at IT that he's now charging a department that already had a set budget and budgeted off of what his costs can be throughout the year, it goes up. Was there a special project that happened in his department and that's why it went up? How could we, in the middle of a budget, increase indirect costs when we should know what that is at the beginning of the year? Does that mean every other department is going to be coming forward to increase their indirect costs?
Well, I just mentioned Community Action did, because, again, when we get the new plan, we don't necessarily know how the allocation is going to ferret itself out. In the case of front of the court with their IT charges, I'd have to look into that, Commissioner. It could be a project. I'm suspecting it might be, but I don't know that authoritatively.
But you understand,
Yeah, I
I'm
understand
trying
where
to
you're
put my
coming
head
from.
around it. We said, okay, this is what our pot is, this is what we're gonna be doing.
Right.
And yet, towards the end of the budget year, we're asking for an increase of indirect costs. That's a fixed number, right? I mean, you come up with a fixed number, or actually, that should be more of a direct cost than indirect. That should be a direct cost because that's utility. I mean, that's your cost of doing business.
It's indirect, it's overhead, I mean, what. I guess we
overhead's
could call
direct.
We could call it 100 things, I
Okay,
suppose.
listen,
But-
I'm trying to get my,
Yeah,
I'm trying to get
it's
an
from the cost
understanding.
allocation plan, again, until we get it. Now, this was when we had the 16 plan. You know, could we have come earlier? I suppose. We've had that plan for a while. So the fact that this is at the end of the year,
You understand my
6.5
concern.
budget.
I'd
I
like to
understand where
see,
you're coming
was
from,
it something particular with the department, or was this something that's going countywide that? The different-
I gotta look at it.
I'd appreciate it when you get the
Yeah,
chance.
yeah,
Thank you.
I can look
And
at it.
Commissioner, I can speculate that we did have trouble with our IT individual that we have with our office. She was also out on an FMLA a large part of that year, so we did have to lean more heavily on IT, as we did not have an IT person specifically from our office. So that might be part of it, if that helps. Just speculation. Yep.
I don't have any other speakers on the list. Is there a motion to forward this item to finance? Moved by Carabelli, supported by Drollet. Please vote on your iPads. The item passes 12-0. It will be forwarded to Finance.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is a budget amendment for the Michigan Indigent Defense Council Commission Fund. And we have Barb Caskey from Community Corrections.
Why don't you do that? That would be wonderful. Good afternoon.
So I'll speak to the dollars and kind of the mechanics of what's going on in the budget. And Barb and John Neisel from the court and Tanya Grillo from the state of Michigan are here to answer more of the operational questions and why this is necessary to do what we're doing. And as we mentioned in the attachments and the documentation that was provided to the commission, there's two adjustments going on here. One is for just about $6.2 million to create a new fund to account for the delivery of indigent defense services. The idea of this in twofold is to transfer all of the existing attorney fee expenses that we pay out of the general fund into this new fund, transfer all the attorney fee reimbursement revenue we receive in the general fund in the circuit court, in the two district courts, into this new indigent defense fund, and then there would be a corresponding transfer out to this new fund. It's all cost neutral for the general fund is the bottom line of all this. What it will require is the addition of 5 personnel, 4.5 FTEs, 2 deputies, 2 corrections deputies, and a part-time MIDC liaison. And there's some training, there's some build-out, so there's some capital outlay that needs to happen. And again, under the proposal that was submitted to the state of Michigan, there will be an increase in the cost of delivering indigent defense services under this act. The state has said that they will make the local or the funding units whole for the additional costs. That's the plan. So that's the plan. So the first adjustment for the $6.2 million is to account for and set up a budget for 2018-2019, beginning on October 1st, which is the required implementation date for all of these new costs and all the associated revenues. So on the attachment, you'll see that's sort of up in the upper right-hand corner. And then the second adjustment is for $916,000 in the general fund to transfer or reduce the budget in the general fund for attorney fees and the attorney fee reimbursement for the last quarter of 2018. Because those costs will start being accounted for in this new fund on October 1st. That's kind of the gist of what's going on. Again, if there's any questions on the reasons for the new personnel and the construction and all those sorts of things, other folks from the courts and the state are here to answer those questions.
Commissioner Kleinfeld?
Thank you. I spent a lot of time staring at this particular page.
I thought you probably.
I was having a
You
hard
might.
time. What I did notice on top was the state grant 2.568 stayed at 2.568. What changed was the general fund contribution. Now, and I think part of you've kind of explained part of it because I was looking at two different things, but we're accounting for the increase from us for the general fund. We're not accounting for any money from the state because they've said they're going to give it to us, but they haven't.
No, really what happened was, I'm not exactly sure what, through the application process, the local share, if you will, is what it was called, was calculated at $2.1 million. And that's the combination of the attorney fee reimbursement revenue of 1.1 and the general fund contribution of $1.1 million. What's actually happening is the 2.7 is what the general fund is currently absorbing in costs for the delivery of attorney or indigent defense purpose or services.
So the original application just wasn't correct?
Correct. So that's about $3.8 million in attorney fees, and you reduce that by $1,085,000 in attorney fee reimbursement, that brings you down to $2.7 million. So the original application was incorrect in how that was all flowing. So again, at the end of the day, there is no increase in the general fund support of indigent defense services.
Okay, but then you go down to the bottom, and the 916 is relative to all the new personnel and everything,
No,
correct?
that's one quarter of this year's budget for defense attorneys and one quarter of the associated reimbursement revenue in the general fund for this year.
So where is all this extra personnel and stuff coming in what's in front of me?
It's coming in the form of full-time wages, part-time wages, overtime wages, FICA, Medicare, and all these.
Up at the top?
Up at the top. So if you look at the upper right-hand corner, we're going from basically $3.8 million of expenses associated with the current delivery of indigent defense services to 6.2 almost.
Where's the 3.8 number?
The 3.8, let me back up a little bit. So you really don't see the 3.8, because that's the current expense, but there's an anticipated increase in the expenses for defense attorneys.
I'm gonna need to take an accounting class, aren't I?
Exactly.
To figure out
So
what's
it's
going
kind
on
of
there.
included, if you go to the left, on the upper left of there, you'll see that attorney fees are 5.2 million almost is what's going on there. So we're anticipating a somewhat large increase in expenses related to that.
Where's the 5.2?
Over to the upper left where it says, on that schedule, where it says attorney fees circuit, 5,191,439.
Do you guys see it?
Under expenditures. I think it's the fifth line down.
Attorney's fees circuit?
Actually, it should
Oh,
say
mine,
attorney fees.
okay, all
That should
right,
just say
I got
attorney
it.
fees, because it includes district as well. But there's really not
Okay.
much, there's only $160-some thousand in attorney fees for the district courts. Most of the costs are in the circuit court.
All right, thank you.
Chair Smith?
So, I know the state has made a promise. So, obviously, that could change at any time. What about when we hire these people and we start this process, and then, the new regime gets up there and they change the amount of money that they're giving us? Are these people that are being brought on kind of pursuant to like grants that we try to do all now say, listen, if this money stops, there's a good chance your job is going to stop. I just want to know
Well, I will
because
let Barb-
I hate to get set up like this, like we get everything in place and the state's paying money, and the next thing you know and then we're left footing a very big bill for something. So I just want to know where our protections lies, number one. And then I have another question too.
Right, exactly. To address that, that was a question we had multiple times throughout the process. And the reality of it is, if the funding isn't there, neither are the services.
Okay.
So we wouldn't be providing those services if the money isn't coming in.
Okay, and we've talked about this before with grants, and there's, I know it's been in the past, we get someone working, there's a grant, and the next thing the grant goes away, and somehow we always feel obligated to try to find the money for them, and we've talked about it in the past, recently, that, and Steve, HR isn't here, but is that explicitly in the contracts of people that are hired under grant or partial grant money? I just want to make sure
I don't know
we're.
that. I can find that out.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay, that would just be a question I'd have, and then
That
last,
is actually, in community
is?
corrections specific department, it is included in there because
Okay.
they are grant funded positions for the most part.
and then last, and I don't know if this is a question for you or for our state representative for this, but when we talk about indigent, what does that actually mean, and how do we? So I agree that I mean, being a relatively new attorney, I see that there are people that don't get the defense that they should get, and I think that this is certainly something that we should look into. But I do have a problem with it, just seeing and knowing some people that say, I need an attorney, and I know that they make a decent amount of money. So my question is there a fix for that in this new, I mean, if you need food stamps or help, something with the state, I mean, there are things that you need to prove. And I understand this is different because this isn't a process that you have all, months and months and months. But I'm just wondering if we've looked into fixing that problem, because I think that we might be at the, just from what I see, I bet you a quarter or more of the people that need court-appointed attorneys can afford a court-appointed attorney just like any one of us could appoint. So I just don't know if that's a fix that we're looking at.
Well, I can address that question. So the
Tanya,
statute
can you
has.
just introduce yourself?
Absolutely.
real quick,
Tanya
please?
Curlow from the Michigan Indigent Defense Commission. I'm the regional manager for Macomb County. The new statute amendments that took place when the appropriations happened, so someone had just brought up they promised the money. Well, we've been appropriated $84.1 million for the first set of standards, so 1 through 4 for 134 funding units. Part of that also talked about the definition or bringing up to the fact of what partially indigent versus indigent really truly means. And what you're saying is absolutely correct. There's lots of systems out there that when a magistrate or a judge is arraigning someone at the very first court appearance, they simply ask the question, are you going to hire one or do you need a court-appointed attorney? And there is no further vetting process in place. We don't have a standard to define indigency at this point. SCAO, which is a state court administrative office, in case anyone didn't know what that acronym meant, they are working on developing that. There's a whole process, and the court rules dictate that a judge or the court specifically has to determine indigency before the appointment process begins. And so right now, that still stays with the courts. So right now, in your system, the magistrates at the district courts can do more vetting. There's an actual SCAO form that's given to people who are requesting court-appointed counsel, and they're filling it out. The form asks some questions that if you are not literate, and if you don't have a true understanding of what's being asked for you, you may not be filling that out properly. That's a different type of problem. And so one of the standards is counsel at first appearance. And one of the systems that is currently already doing this is Huron County. Judge Harrington out in Huron County has a system, and they've created forms to help the attorneys who are at the arraignment ask specific questions of all defendants. All defendants will get counsel at first appearance. And at that process, they try to answer some more really simplistic questions to determine whether or not this person is indigent. I've actually seen Judge Harrington vet someone and say, I think you have enough disposable income to hire your own attorney. Why don't you try to do that? We'll set this out for 2 weeks. Come back in 2 weeks, let me know if you're able to. Because the reality is that most people don't have $5,000 sitting in a bank account to hire an attorney. I know Commissioner Toko does family law, so she's very familiar with how retainers work. And in the criminal world, I know, Commissioner Smith, you were doing some criminal cases when you first graduated. So these individuals don't always have the funds, and frankly, as an attorney myself, payment plans don't always work. You never get paid. And so some people just don't have the funds that are available. So it's really hard to say that someone who's walking into court who's nicely dressed, carrying a bag, wearing family-owned jewelry might not be indigent, though they might be working with what their best attire is because they're trying to put the best foot forward, because on every sign in every courtroom, it says no shorts, no tank tops, you have to have shoes, you have to dress appropriate. So we're really trying to work on that. I hope that answers your question.
Well, it's a start. Thanks.
Commissioner Kleinfeld?
I'm sorry, I'm coming back around again. First of all, this is a mandate.
Correct.
So this so heavily applies. So any question with regard to funding, they can't pull the plug on the funding now. They've had to agree to it because this is a mandate, correct?
Correct.
So administration changes should not matter.
It shouldn't, and God willing, the next governor will have the decency to continue a program that started to assist indigent individuals in the state of Michigan. We are
Okay.
ranked at the bottom of the barrel in the country for per capita spending, and that's the problem. And for the longest time,
Okay,
local
I
systems
don't
were
want to,
bootstrapped.
we don't have to go somewhere else. I have a series of questions, okay? So, so the second one is with regard to the vetting. I'm sure it costs courts money to do vetting, I would assume. Because unless it's just, give me your word, it's going to cost courts to do, and if the cities are getting reimbursed for the indigent counsel, there's no incentive for the courts to do vetting, is there?
Well, lots of funding units that I've spoken to, including yours, concerned about the overall cost. Frankly, in my experience, I didn't represent many people who looked like they could afford me on the outside. And that's just my experience. I mean, when we look around the state of Michigan, it's unlikely that this is an abusive practice. There's a couple bad apples in every bunch, not to the levels that I think most people are thinking is happening. The vetting process in itself, there's questions. As a magistrate, you're asking specific questions. Where do you work? How many children do you have? Do you own a house? Do you rent a house? Those are the types of questions you're trying to determine. At the end of the day, at the end of a close of a case in 38th District Court, for example, Judge Gerds will ask for all fines and costs to be paid at sentencing. And at that moment, if someone is asking for a payment plan or they're trying to say that they're indigent and they cannot afford it, bring us your tax returns and they'll do some calculations. When you have counsel at first appearance, all those costs, if you're having the attorney gather that information before they're at the arraignment, that is time that is being spent by the attorney, and that's covered in the compliance plan. Those costs are part of that, and those are the funds that are going to be taking that on.
Okay.
Commissioner, could I add something?
Well, the word vetting, to me, is like you're not asking them questions and they're answering. If I'm vetting somebody, I'm going to go look myself and find something out. But I don't think that the courts have the time and energy to do that. So that was the reason for my question.
Sure.
I'm not necessarily saying I expect it. I'm just asking that basically it's an honor system thing, but we're going on the assumption that most people can't afford it.
Correct.
If I could just add one point of clarification, Commissioner Kleinfeld.
Sure.
John Neisel, Deputy Court Administrator, for the record. We do attempt to collect from the defendant after the fact. So if the defendant is incarcerated in the Department of Corrections, we regularly do sweeps, and we take the permissible amount out of their prisoner account. Later on, if they receive tax refunds or anything like that, we intercept that money. So we do attempt to collect the money in the event that the individual turns out not to be indigent or to have some money to contribute to their defense.
And in my experience,
Okay, but I hope you're not doing that when people truly are indigent.
No.
And you're sweeping in and taking their last 2 cents.
No, it's automatically calculated. For instance, when they're in the Department of Corrections, the view is that 50% of anything over $50, there's a presumption of non-indigency for the prisoner at that point, so that amount can be collected. It's all
Okay.
a matter of law.
All right, thank you, Chair.
Well, and just to point on that, I do more than family. I do criminal and I do court appointments. And a lot of times I see a form that's filled out by the defendant that says, this is my name, this is my address, this is where I work, this is how much I have. I've always assumed that that's the court's vetting process, and then they sign the bottom of that form. Are you saying that not all courts use that form?
not all courts have a defendant fully complete that form.
Okay.
And I'm not saying specifically it's the 42s that are doing that. Based upon my experience looking across my 4 county regions, 22 court systems, there's lots of information that's being missed. And I've asked magistrates, how do they determine whether or not somebody, is indigent? And a woman, a female magistrate indicated that her sibling was a home care health worker. So when someone says that, she knows exactly how much money they're not making. And so that's her decision-making. Over experience and time, these magistrates have determined whether or not, based upon those responses, that equals anything and whether or not anything else additional has to be filled out. Judge Gerds' court does by far one of the best at filling out that information, and Warren they do as well. It's just a different process. And
Okay.
we're hoping to create something that's streamlined down the road, and I know SCAO's working on that as well. The court rules have to shift and change because indigency has to be determined by the court and no one else at this point. And so that's coming into play as well.
Okay, like I know 39th, when I get a court appointment, it has that sheet attached to it, and the income information and the expenses are on there and they're signed. It may not be completed fully, but there is some process.
Correct.
Okay, Commissioner Romano?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple, if I may. Realizing that this compliance, it has to be implemented, that's a fact. Is there a record someplace that shows how much money has been collected from these people that, can we get those eventually or sometime about how much money you've collected in, say, 2017?
You mean the
We know what we're
reimbursements?
spending. I'd like to know how much we're collecting. That's the first question, if I may, unless you have that available.
Well, I mean, it's generally right around 1 million, 1 million, one a year.
That's what we collect.
Yeah, that's what we collect.
Okay, so we know what we
So
spend.
call it a million for ease of
Million here, million there,
conversation,
right.
yeah.
Okay, so seeing what we spend, what's going out, what's coming in, we're still at a minus figure. But I have another question here. I'm looking at this compliance plan narrative, and the last paragraph says, "It should be noted that additional standards, particularly Standard 5, will result in significant increased costs to the county for both planning and implementation." What is Standard 5? If you could explain that to me,
I think
please.
that's something that John and I need to speak to because it's relevant to the county's plan itself. Excuse me, Tanya.
Oh, no problem.
John and I felt like it was extraordinarily important to put that in there because Standard 5 basically separates all of these responsibilities from the court into the funding unit. So it essentially, for the county, will probably result in the creation of a new department. So you're taking all of the responsibility from the court and moving it elsewhere, which is going to be based on administrative costs and, all of the things that all of our departments run into is going to be significant.
So that's going to be a large increase.
Yes.
And Commissioner, those standards have not been approved yet, but they're pending. And Tanya, I guess, could probably speak to that, but there's another set of standards in the works right now in Lansing. And one of them, the one Barb is referencing, Standard 5, it's independence from the judiciary.
So you will be before us again, looking for some more money if in fact that standard is implemented.
Asking you to accept their money. is what
Thank you.
we're-
That's all I have.
I do not see any other speakers on the list. Are there any other questions? Is there a motion to forward this to finance? Moved by Sagar, supported by Carabelli. Please vote on your device. The item passes 11-0. Thank you. That concludes my part of the agenda.
Thank you, Commissioner Toko. Yeah, he's gonna fly him out of here. Cool stuff. I'm waiting. Kevin, you're just about ready? No, we're waiting for him to finish up. When the big case is closed.
Exactly.
They're vetting all the time. Toko. Yeah. In a minute. In a minute. Everybody's getting fascinated about what's in the box. Yeah.
Don't ask Justin Timberlake. Someone would get it.
I'm too tired. I'm still sleeping. Wow.
Doesn't it seem like we should be playing the Mission Impossible theme right now?
Can you
Yeah.
deliver packages with that?
Yeah, can you get a 6-pack of beer with that?
Actually, it's funny to answer that.
How much will it lift? How much weight will it lift, does it say?
They are working on a mechanism that can carry items like inflatable flotation devices.
Like beer?
Perfect.
Well, if Amazon can deliver packages, they should be able to.
Everybody's got a priority.
We've heard yours.
Not beer. Mine's cognac. I drink a 6-pack of beer a year. I love cognac. Cognac. Or a single malt scotch.
Not
right.
nearly as exciting. No.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, my presentation is significantly more boring.
Good
Yeah.
afternoon,
Thank
Kevin.
you.
Please proceed.
Yeah, well, it is to some, and that's actually, Mr. Chair and Commissioners, this is a continuation of the conversation that we began last month. Just to give a little context, we had talked about skilled occupancy being at a 5-year low and census being driven down across not only Macomb County but across the country. And we also talked a little bit about what's happening in the industry as a whole. The reason I share context with you is last month I attempted to put your minds at ease to make you aware of our facility having some cash, in a few years where our cash is going to be diminishing, and to let you know that we're aware of that and that we're managing that. My hope was to put your mind at ease at that, but it had the opposite effect. So in that conversation, the conversation brought up as to, what's really happening, and we talked about something called EBITDA. Right now, let me talk first about census. Average census in Michigan is about 81.9%, which translates into about 177 residents, which at our facility, which is at the bottom of this slide here. You see the solid blue line is where we are at census, and we're significantly above and have been above the state average for the last several years. Even when our census was at its low, it still wasn't anywhere near close to the state average. That's because there's a real need for a social safety net, and we're filling that need. We also right now only have one available bed, which is unheard of in the state of Michigan right now. The item that brought concern was our discussion about our financial stability. I'm confident in our financial stability, even though days cash on hand is going down because we're investing in the building. Over the next 5 years, we'll be putting about $7 million into the building. That is in infrastructure and improvements that have been somewhat, in the transition. They weren't kept up. So we're working on that pretty well. But then when I talked about the cash going down, as well as us improving our financial benchmarks of days in accounts payable and days in accounts receivable, the question was raised, well, how you're really doing, and can we bring EBITDA to that? So I thought, just for the purpose, and please forgive me if everybody knows what this is, but I thought it was important that for those that don't know what it is, that we share that. EBITDA is a non-GAAP tool that's used to measure a company's financial performance. It's removing some of the one-time or non-recurring expenses to show what's happening operationally. That comes from Investopedia. And then Morris Anderson is a little bit more direct. It says it's a tool to be used for a facility to see, can you make a profit or should you be closed? So that's what EBITDA is. And that's earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation. So the idea here is to show you how we're doing from an EBITDA standpoint. June was 6 months, so we have 6 months of revenue here at about roughly $13.5 million. Now our operations, our admin, maintenance expenses, laundry, and you see the list here. It's not a surprise to you that nursing expenses is the largest section of that. Administration expenses rolls up several things: all of our interest, all of our insurances, all of our contracts, our legal fees, and many other things are baked into the admin expenses. So our total operating expenses are about 12.8. Again, this is year-to-date, June of this year. So when you look at what essentially is EBITDA, you see that we have the ability right now to be in the black about $672,000 year-to-date. So we're in great shape from an operations standpoint. Now what you're looking at is underneath that, pension and OPEB. That's over $500,000 that we have so far, and every year we're going to be paying that. Over the years, that will diminish through mortality and attrition for those that are in that program. So you're going to see that probably the next year or two stay pretty solid, and then it's going to start diminishing. Our current depreciation are the things that since 2009, the facility has purchased and has been able to depreciate ourselves. The vast amount of depreciation right now is held on the county books, and we talked about that before. I'll revisit that on another day. Yes, yeah, the county has I think 6 or 7 times that. Okay. All right, the bond repayment has been called building use, and building use actually is inappropriate use of it because you cannot charge rent to yourself as a county entity. Though we are a discreetly presented component of the county, if it's not in the Magnus report, then you can't charge it for us. But this is a bond that we're about ready to get complete the repayment on it in about 4 years, 2022. Okay. So our total non-operating expenses, if you take a look at that, are $1.2 million, which means that we are total expenses are 14.1, which puts us at a loss year to date at about $538,000. And you say, well, are you going to be $1 million in the hole at the end of the year? The answer is no on that. But what you can see here is the pension and OPEB, and the bond repayment is about a $2 million nut that every year we have to crack just to keep the business running. What this also represents is, in addition to paying the pension, keeping that promise, we're keeping our promise to our current employees by expensing our current retirement program every year. So our current retirement program is rolled up into the total operating expenses above the EBITDA line. Does everybody understand that? Any questions on that? Okay. So we are doing quite well from an operations standpoint. We have a number of things that we have to weather the storm on. We are going to be using cash to keep the facility going. The additional articles that I shared with you in this slide talks about the silver tsunami, and there's going to be an influx. The president of the American Healthcare Association says that it's going to be around 2025, but some other people are more optimistic. In 2 or 3 years, they believe that it's going to go up. I'm pleased to say that we're already improving our census ahead of everybody else. The main reason for that is what the article states, having a niche. Our niche is we care for those that nobody else wants to care for. Most facilities go after the Medicare dollars, which can be as much as $700 or $800 a day, which is $400 or $500 more than we get a day for our Medicaid residents or indigent residents. So we're in great shape. from an operations standpoint, our cash is going to be diminishing as we, finish paying off the bond and as we make the improvements. But we still have, well over $6 million available to do that. We budget an additional $600,000 a year to help us with the capital improvement projects. And our cash will probably diminish down to around $1.5 million or $2 million in 4 years. And then after the bond is repaid, that $1 million will be coming back to us. And then we're hoping to get the depreciation moved over so we can start creating what's called a funded depreciation or a sinking fund for what most people know.
All right, very good. We've got a couple of speakers. First and foremost, can I get a motion to receive and file? We have a motion by Lucido, supported by Grolette. Chairman Smith.
Thank you. Just real quick, hi Kevin, thanks for coming and presenting. From the pension board meeting this morning, we were talking actuarial numbers, and we're getting a report next 2 weeks from now from our actuary, but the initial report was that Martha Teaberry was 114% funded in the pension fund, so just wanted to let you guys all know that.
That's great, thank you.
I don't have any other questions for you. Thanks.
I appreciate that, thank you.
Very good. Kevin, question. How much do you see revenues going up if you stay with only one bed open?
Well, we budgeted for 193 beds, which means 14 beds were open.
Right.
So right now we're pacing ahead of that of our projected census significantly. We budget revenue conservatively. One of the things that you don't see here is we had 140,000 in utilities that went off the rails, and we're trying to figure out, it was a bad meter, we believe, so we're researching that. There are a number of other unexpected costs that occurred in there that we keep track of. So we budget revenue conservatively, and we budget directly on our expenses. So if we do have some of those surprises, then we can cover those. As an enterprise fund, we have that ability and that flexibility.
All right, very good. Thank you. Next, Commissioner Sauger.
Yeah, I was just curious, our readout got canceled on a lot of things we're looking. I'm just wondering, how is the food expense over there?
Food expense is
Because I didn't see nothing on here whatsoever.
Oh, well, our food expense is high, but we're working on a lot of education and training for our staff. We did hire a chef to help us with understanding how to appropriately create food. We had a lot of waste. It didn't matter if we had 190 or 217; they made the same amount. Mm-hmm. So, learning how to change recipes is something that is a skill. So right now it's a little bit higher than I want it to be, but the quality is improving and our outcomes are improving.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you. Any other comments or questions? Seeing and hearing none, we have a motion and we have support to receive and file. Please vote. Kevin is boring but short. Yes, well done, Kevin.
Always leave you wanting more. Thank you.
And the motion passed 12-0. Number 9, department recommendations. County of Macomb 2016 Annual Action Plan, proposed substantial amendment. Joe Cook, Stephanie Burrs. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Joe Cook, Division Director with Macomb Community Action. I brought with me Stephanie Burgess, Program Manager for Community Development, to answer any questions that you may have about the request.
Good afternoon.
Good
For your approval is a substantial amendment to the 2016 Annual Action Plan. The substantial amendment is needed whenever cumulative changes exceed the amount in the Citizen Participation Plan. The proposed changes presented for your approval do exceed that amount, so it's presented again for consideration. What we'll be doing is, what we're suggesting is moving $646,000 out of housing rehabilitation into 5 projects that were selected through a notice of funding availability that was made available to the 21 communities that participate in the county's CDBG program. There was 5 applications that were submitted, and we are able to fund all 5, fortunately. The other part of that substantial amendment is shifting funds in the home program so that we do not exceed the cap for administration and that we meet the minimum requirement for the 15% that has to go for CHODO activities, which is community housing development organizations. Do you have any questions?
Very good. Can I get a motion to forward this to finance? Motion by Romano, support by Lucido. Commissioner Carabelli.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What was the reason why we're moving the money from the housing rehabilitation?
What we want to do is we want to make sure that we don't exceed the 1.5 ratio for timeliness. And that's what we're approaching right now for the community development block grant. We can't have more than 1.5 times at April 30th of each year. So we have to have those monies spent out. We have gotten quite a bit of money back with program income, projects that come under budget, and projects that don't proceed. So we'd like to get that money back out before we have a finding from HUD.
The reason why I ask, I figured that's what it was. And my concern is, and I know you ask these other communities and you get 5 applications and you give them the money away. But I do also know that there's applications that you receive that will take X amount of dollar per year of CDBG funds to complete a project. And why wouldn't we have wanted those communities to pay off those projects earlier and finish the project instead of adding new ones on? So hypothetically, Community X is going to commit $1 million of CDBG funds to make sidewalks in a certain area go around 5 miles. And they say, okay, we're going to take our CDBG funds over a 5-year program and put it into here. And each year when it comes in, we can go a little further and a little further and a little further. And they commit future years. They can't spend it, so when the money comes, it's part of that plan that they submitted and got approved by the county. Why wouldn't we have wanted to take those plans that were approved and try to expedite those instead of adding new ones on?
There really isn't, that may be the community's plan, but they only submit 1 year at a time for the annual action plan. So we encourage them to have projects planned out for, say, 5 years. That doesn't mean that that funding is committed to that project for 5 years. In this,
Exactly, it's not
yeah.
committed to it because they don't have it yet.
Right,
And
but
my
they
thing
could
is-
have, they could have applied under this notice of funding availability for that, and they did not.
Okay, all right, thank you for that information.
You're
Thank you.
welcome.
Any other comments or questions? Seeing and hearing none, we have a motion and support to forward this to finance. Please vote. Nice job.
Thank you.
And the motion passed 12-0. Next on the hit parade, 9B, Budget Amendment, Health Department MDEQ Research Grant, Macomb County Beach Water Samples. Andrew Cox. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. How you doing today?
Near perfect.
Great. I'm requesting you approve, hopefully, this amendment to accept this award that we received on behalf of DEQ for some additional research testing for water quality at our beaches at Lake St. Clair. So that would include New Baltimore, Metro Beach, and then also Memorial Beach. We're already conducting testing through traditional methods. This would allow us to do additional research with qPCR, and what the difference is that qPCR will tell you where the sources came from. Currently, I can't tell you. I can tell you how much E. coli is in the water, but I can't tell you where it's from. And when we're looking at improving water quality, we need to know where the sources of contamination are occurring. And to do that, we need to know what that source is. So this qPCR will include source tracking. So it'll tell us whether it's human or different forms of animal waste, E. coli, and that will assist us with really formulating a plan to go upstream and to really pinpoint this issue of where is this waste coming from, and to hopefully resolve those issues in the future.
All right, very good. This will be forwarded to finance. Do we have a motion and support? We have a motion by Kraft, support by Myjack. Rather long, distinguished list of speakers. Commissioner Carabelli.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You named 3 beaches that you're going to be using this grant for.
Correct.
Out of curiosity, why just those 3, and why didn't we want to look at
So
more?
they don't qualify, this particular grant funding does not qualify for the 2 additional beaches, the inland beaches that we do at Stony Creek, which are the 2 beaches that we monitor there as well.
Okay.
We do monitoring of 5 beaches in total, but this grant would only be allowed to be used for those
3
beaches that are on Lake St. Clair.
Great. Next question is do you work with the CRWC, Clinton River?
Yes, we do.
Okay, because I sit on the board over there, and we were just talking last night that HCMA and CRWC are looking to get together to get a $250,000 grant to do exactly what you're talking about. And I'm just wanting to make sure everybody's talking to everybody, because again, I know it's grant money, but if we're all doing the same thing more than once, it's not productive, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's a great point. We work very closely with them. In fact, my supervisor, Stacy McFarland, is very active on Clinton River Watershed Council, so we know very intimately what they're planning to do and how they're partnering with HCMA. And they're doing some different type of testing in different areas around Metro Beach and around the watershed.
Okay.
But this is really concentrating on those beach samples.
All right, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Myjack.
Yes, do you know any other areas in Michigan or the country that have implemented testing methods similar to this?
You know, I'm a little bit proud to say that we're leading the nation in this. And part of this research is going to EPA. They need to look at this data to formulate a statewide criteria to use qPCR for testing. And the reason why we really want to see this go into effect is that it's a quicker turnaround. We can get qPCR results in a matter of 3 to 4 hours at the most. Whereas currently we're waiting 24 hours for samples to come back. So that doesn't help us for the people that are swimming in that water that day. And so we need something quicker and more timely. And that's why this qPCR is really something that we're really wanting to look at. But you also have to, because you're comparing apples and oranges between the coliform counts that we do with the agar cultures and this qPCR that's really looking at DNA. And we want to make sure that we're accurately telling you and the public what the risk is. And is it safe or is it not safe? And we need to make sure that we're all on board and have a standardized criteria across the state.
It's going to be very interesting. I don't know what the results would be. I would guess humans, human E. coli would be a lot higher. In the past, there have been very extreme high E. coli counts upstream, which indicates more human waste, human E. coli than being on the beach. So you're going to have to, based on the results that happen, my guess is there's going to be a lot of human DNA there. And if that's the case, you're going to have to work with the Public Works Office to figure out where are these illicit connections coming from, and
Exactly.
but now, hypothetically speaking, if it's animal bird, then you're going to have to figure out how to deal with that.
Right. You're exactly right. And we work very closely with Public Works. They're a great partner of ours. Especially, we've got a really great relationship now since Candace Miller came into office.
Yeah.
We've been working with them very closely. And I think you brought up a great point that it's a guess. And I think we all guess. And I think for years we've wanted answers about where this is coming from. And we need to get accurate answers instead of just coming up with our own ideas, because you talk to probably different people around the community, and you get a lot of different answers about why we're having beach closures, and as many as we do. So we need a way to really determine factually with data, really what is the reason for the closures,
Right.
not just is it SSOs, is it CSOs, is it the birds that are on the beach? We need to know really. And it's probably a mix of multiple sources, honestly.
Right. Because I remember I was on this board back in the 90s. Yes, I'm old. And we had our health department environmental division give us annual monthly updates on the E. coli counts, and they were just off the charts. And I haven't seen numbers lately, but I just deduced from that back then that was human activity, illicit connection, 100%. So it'll be interesting to see where we're at with these beach counts. So thank you very much for coming here today, and anything we can do to help you out in the future, let us know.
Thank you, Commissioner Majak. I'm going to continue blaming Oakland County. Commissioner Kraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You just rattled off a bunch of answers to questions I had, so I think I only have one or two. This QPCR test, does that work sort of independent of the E. coli test? So do you get the water testing, and if you find E. coli, then you run it through the QPCR, or does that QPCR test for E. coli and then go further to the source?
So it's a really great question. We run simultaneously the test because we want to compare the results of the standard test that's approved now to the QPCR test and see line by line what is the results that we're seeing. And that's what EPA is doing. They're taking our data, you know, not just our data, but several beaches in the state of Michigan, and really compiling that to make a standardized number. We have that criteria already in place for the standard method, but when we collect, we're also collecting an extra sample for QPCR as well. Okay. So they're going to be run independently of each other, but we're going to use that data to compare on days. And specifically when we have exceedances, we want to know those particular days, why was the beach closed? And why do we have the exceedance? And that's where the QPCR is going to come into play.
Okay, and how long is this grant for?
This goes until December 19th.
Okay,
There's been talk, the EQ is really working on additional funding too beyond that, but they struggle as well with the uncertainty at the federal level through EPA funding.
Sure. Okay, all right, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? We have a motion and support to forward this to the Finance Committee. Please vote. Very well spent. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Number 10, correspondence. Is there a motion to receive and file all four? We have a motion by Majak, support by Kleinfeld. Or was that Toko? Toko, sorry. All in favor, please vote. Uh, 11, new business. Any new business from commissioners? We have new business from Commissioner Majak.
Yeah, thank you. I was just going to mention, we had a press conference meeting a couple days ago, Innovate Mound. So we received $100 million through Congress, thanks to all the parties involved, Senator Stabenow, Peters, Congressman Level, Don's boss, Congressman Mitchell. So we have $100 million for that. We need about another $100 million, and we have to work on that. You know, that'll come from the cities of Sterling Heights, Warren, the county, and then the state. So we're making headway on that. I'm sure all of you who weren't there at that meeting heard about it in the newspapers or the media. So that's all I have to report on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Romano.
Thank you, Chair. I think congratulations are in order for the primary, which was Commissioner Drollet, Commissioner Toko, Commissioner Lucido, and Commissioner Romano. I think we did well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bravo for the amateurs. Any other new business? Commissioner Smith.
Thank you, and I echo that. Congratulations. I'm happy that this board is looking like it might stay intact. So two things. Crystal's passing out something I'm going to speak to second. First, just a reminder that Monday is a joint GovOps and infrastructure meeting, and it has a lengthy agenda. But remember, it's 2 meetings in one, so please plan accordingly, not to complain. Please plan accordingly. It includes funding requests for capital projects, so please try to review these beforehand, because we cut the capital projects so that they would come to us to look at these individually. So let's look at them and have a little bit of advanced knowledge of them for any questions that we might need to ask. Actually, I have 3 things. So that being said, Monday we asked and this will go to our lawsuit. Monday, we asked for IT and through Steve to give us a copy of their year-to-date budget, right? Their finance, what they've spent, what, you know, all the line item stuff that they've been telling us, you know, just ask us and you'll get it, right? Because we don't have IFAS. We still haven't heard, we haven't seen it yet. We asked Monday. I talked to Steve today. Apparently, we're going to get it tomorrow morning, right? So just in time for the weekend and then Monday's budget, you know, request. So, but my point to all this is this. Patty showed me how to get onto IFAS and to pull up this request in our budget. And it literally took her 30 seconds to get into IFAS, pull up the same thing but in our budget, because that's all we can see. And when you hit one button, it prints it all out. And so we're waiting from Monday to Friday. No, I'm not going to say that anything's going on. Maybe they're busy, but this is just another point of why we should have this. These are these are numbers that we want to look at to base our budget, capital project review. You know, we want to base on some numbers. So we're going to get them at the last second. We can't pull them up when we need to. I just want to point out how easy it is when we hear the executive or anybody else talking about how, you know, that we have some low-level employees that couldn't figure this out. It's the same in every budget. Crystal and Patty know how to figure this stuff out in a second. So just a point to remember on one of the reasons that we're asking for this IFAS thing and how much simpler it would be for all of us, for our job, to have it here. That being said, what Crystal passed out was kind of a summary of Commissioner Carabelli and my meeting with the deputy executives of Maryland Lane. She had sent Executive Lorenzo sent back some agreements and just clarifying some things. And we put a little memo together. We didn't agree to anything. There's no agreements. Jim and I can't agree to anything. I mean, we can agree to talk to everybody about it. We can agree that we'll, you know, individually we would try to do certain things, and but I just want to make it perfectly clear that we don't go into these meetings intending to agree on anything for the board. We bring it back to you guys, which apparently exactly what we did that day. We brought it back and gave a little rundown of what we spoke of in that meeting. So you're going to see some things from Marilyn and from Al about what we talked about, but let's just make sure that we understand that we never agreed that we would do joint press conferences on lawsuits. I mean, lawsuits are inherently confrontational. What we agreed to was on the back memo, which is what I sent to Mark, I don't know, almost 8 months ago, is that if we decided to go to the media, we would at least notify the other party.
Point of information.
Go ahead.
As board chair elected by the body, Bob has the right to enter into certain agreements himself when he speaks on our behalf. And Bob made it very clear that at no time he said he can't control a commissioner not to go to the press or can't control him to do anything, even if we made a motion. Everybody's their own person. So they were thinking that Bob was able to control us and gag us or whatever the deal may be. So I just wanted to make that clear. That's how that kind of came out, and Bob was quite clear, saying I can't control if somebody talks to the press or not.
So in case you thought I controlled you, let's make it clear. That doesn't happen. So anyway, this is just a kind of a rundown of what we talked about, what we're yet to talk about. We have a meeting on Monday. Our new court date is at the end of this month on the 28th. We'll have a few meetings before then to discuss things. And I'll say this, from my own standpoint, I think that what we're asking for, and I don't care, be it the older adult committee or any other committee, it's the fact that we are saying that we can have a committee unto ourselves. It doesn't matter if it's the older adults or the kids or anything like that. So I'm not one to say I want to give that up and negotiate that right away that the board has. And as far as IFAS goes, I think that's kind of our job, and we should have that. But I'm just one person, and I invite any of you that have a differing opinion on what we should be looking at giving or taking on these lawsuits to come and talk to me, because apparently I'm hearing from the executive's office that a bunch of people are coming to them saying, we just need to get this settled and we'll settle this. But no one really comes to me or says that. I mean, and when it comes down to it, when we get an offer, maybe we'll, if we get an offer, well, obviously we would bring it back and we would discuss it. But I can't see giving up any of the rights that we are 100% sure that we know we have the right to. But nonetheless, maybe there's some other room in some different areas for negotiation that we can work into. Or maybe we want to give up some of those. I'm not really sure yet, but go ahead, Commissioner Kleinfeld.
If we negotiated those things away now, in a couple of years, we'd be right back to where we started. With a new board maybe, but the same issues. So, but in her memo, there was one thing that really stood out to me, and I don't think her memo's in here, is it?
Yep.
Oh, is it? Okay.
It is, so let's take a second and find it.
Well, it's item 7, the agenda management system. It says a recommendation for BOC action can only be withdrawn by the party submitting it.
Okay.
Well, it's our meeting.
I'll speak to that.
Okay.
What they meant is, well, and this is what we clarified. Our committee chair is the person that puts things on and takes it off. What we explained to them is that the wording is, if your department submits it through you, through the executive, that the executive has to ask for it down. Because what happened is Gary Cutler tried to pull something off of an agenda that he knew we weren't ready for, and he tried to save some time and not go through the executive's office and not get it to us in time. And so he put it right on the agenda management system, which, by the way, as soon as it goes to our agenda management system, it is visible to everybody, including the executive's office. So that's how they knew that Gary tried to rescind an item because we didn't have the information yet, and he knew that. So they got all upset, and I'm telling you, we got phone calls. You can't take that off of there because he's not the one that submitted it. We submitted it, and we're like, well, first of all, it's really not our job for your departments to know their chain of command. It's not, so now, we know, all right, if Gary or somebody else says, I want my agenda off, we'll say, well, you have to speak to the executive, but realistically, they're supposed to know that, not us. So that's where that came from, and that's what this is about. But I am very clear all the time to change this and send it back, that we are in control of what goes on and what doesn't. There's our request to put it on our agenda or to remove it from our agenda, and that's it.
The reason I brought it up is because the way that it reads, if we didn't make a clarification and we did end up in court, this is a document, so it requires.
We are going to be responding to all this. I wanted to talk to everybody a little bit about this. Oh, yeah, Patty. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, we've never said and we're not all right yet, so we're not.
You said you're meeting on Monday?
We have a meeting on Monday. The 3 commissioners are, this time is Commissioner Carabelli and Commissioner Leonetti. We are going to, and we've talked to them about, I want Michelle and Patty in on these meetings too, just for some, better note-taking on, these, because apparently.
Continuity.
Yes. So we're gonna look at that. That's gonna happen starting Monday. And I was considering even having our attorneys just sit in on them, because I'm really, there's times when I don't like the law that is created in those meetings sometimes. So we are looking at that. I'll see how this next one goes. If it keeps going down that road, I'm gonna have Pete sit in on all these meetings with us. It seems like I'll give it one more shot and see how they're doing. And then we'll go from there. Any other questions on these meetings or any suggestions that anybody has? I'll be happy to hear them either here or in private. So that being said, please plan for a long meeting on Monday. And that's it.
All right, thank you. Any other comments or questions? Number 12, public participation. Anybody in the audience going once, twice, thrice? We have a motion by Kraft, support by Lucido to adjourn. Please vote. Thank you very much.